online at www.koppelOutfitters.com and on social media at Koppel Outfitters. Our guest today may be the hardest working angler in the country. He's fished 5 major tour events so far, and we haven't even made it to the month of April yet. So far this season, he's fished Toyota Series events at Sam Rayburn, where he finished 39th. Lake Toho, he finished 26th. Fished a Big 5 Pro Circuit stop at Okeechobee, where he got 94th. At Toyota Series event at Guntersville, where he finished 20th. And he finished 19th at the Major League Fishing Pro Circuit stop at Smith Lake. He's a 2-time qualifier for the Major League Fishing Championship Tour Championship, and he currently leads the Bass Tour Anglers podcast Angler of the Year race with an 85-point lead over Zach Burge. Dakota Ebare, welcome to the Bass Tour Anglers podcast. Thanks for being with us. Where are you today?
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm actually at Dale Hollow right now, getting ready for a Toyota Series that starts next Wednesday here. So pretty excited about that. I really like this lake, man. It's just fun. There's smallmouth everywhere. They don't really play as much because of the slot limit, but they're still fun to catch. And there's a lot of largemouth in the lake too. It's a really a fun place, and it's beautiful. I mean, I don't know if you can see the scenery in the background, but it's just a cool place to be.
Yeah, I told you he was the hardest working pro in the country. I mean, he's fishing today as time during the middle of this interview. First of all, congratulations on leading the Bass Tour Anglers podcast, Angler of the Year race. I know we've talked about this before, but if folks don't know what this is, the Bass Tour Anglers podcast, we follow all the different tours that are out there. We take a look at the events that the top pros fish, and we track them all through the season. 63 events we're tracking this season. And so far, Dakota is the leader. We've got an 85-point lead. We'll see how this works throughout the rest of the year. But how many events are you going to fish this year?
Man, I think I've got around 22 probably scheduled, 22 to 23. And I think, I fished a little local tournament the other day too, so you count that. It'll be somewhere around 24 events probably by the time it's all said and done. Good Lord willing, I'm trying to go to as many of them as I can, but there's a lot going on, a lot different directions. So I'm trying to go pretty much as many as the schedule allows, I mean, just every day that you're on the water, you get better, and that's the goal. So that's what we're trying to do.
So you started in Texas this year, back in February, I think it was. Yeah, it had to be February. Then you moved on to Florida. And then you moved up into Alabama and different regions. Do you feel like you're following fish migrations as you go along? I mean, are the fish kind of doing similar things as you move along, or does one event not help the next?
No, not really. It hasn't really been that way because I've been going from one extreme to the other. Like actually last week I had 2 events in 1 week. We had Smith Lake, and then 3 days later, I was actually fishing the Toyota Series on the Harris Chain. So that was actually the 6th event that I fished this year. So it was really one extreme to the other. I mean, that Saturday I was catching, pre-spawn spotted bass, over 100 foot of water. And then, a couple days later, I'm at Harris Chain catching, largemouth around hydrilla that were all post-spawn, offshore. Typically, actually, it really does kind of work that way, though, where, you kind of follow the spawn, I mean, you and sometimes you hit it to where it seems like every event that, they're spawning at, and you'll start down in Florida and they'll be spawning there and just work your way north. But this year with all the cold weather and stuff that we've had, it's really just kind of thrown things for a loop. A lot of things are kind of behind. And I was thinking about that a while ago, actually, while I was here at Dale Hollow, because there's still pre-spawn here, and the weather is kind of up and down, and I don't know that we're gonna have a spawn tournament here. I don't think that it'll be that way. And I was like, man, I don't know that I'll get to really fish a spawn tournament this year, full on, because by the time we get to Lake Murray in April, I think they'll be pretty well done there. So it's been a little bit of a different year, with the extreme cold weather that we had for a couple weeks.
So far in 2021, is there a technique that you have been able to use in almost every event? Probably not shaky heads, over 100 feet down in Florida, but I mean, has there been any one technique that you've taken from place to place?
Ah, man, it's been a little. It's been just it's been week to week, but it's been different pretty much every week, honestly. But that's the good thing about traveling and going to different places every week is that it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you with an open mind, knowing that you're going to be in a different type of body of water pretty much every week, and you can't get too. You don't. For me personally, like I like to try to be as well rounded as I can and be comfortable fishing in any style. And when you're swapping bodies of water like that, it seems to keep you on your toes and keep you with an open mind, and it kind of gets you in the rhythm of being able to relax and just go fishing because you're not going to have a lot of time to really practice. Typically I haven't had a lot of time to practice at these places, so it's been just pretty much hit the ground running, figure something out, and go with it. So it's been good because it's been really challenging for me, and I think that's making me better.
This segment of the Bass Tour Anglers podcast is brought to you in part by Top Tier Tackle. With over 30 years of experience in the rod building industry, look for Top Tier's XT, Affinity, and Valor series this fall, wherever fine tackle is sold. We're talking to Dakota Ebare. He is the leader of the Bass Tour Anglers podcast Angler of the Year race. I wanted to, I wanted to talk a little bit about your YouTube channel. You post a lot of content on your YouTube channel, Dakota Ebare Outdoors. One video that caught my attention was posted last April 2020. You're catching schooling bass at Sam Rayburn. Now, this week the Bass Pro Tour is at Rayburn. That event just finished up a few minutes ago, actually. But there were guys catching schooling bass there as well. I want to, and because that was strange for me to see that. It seems like the wrong time of year for schooling bass. Are those all post-spawn fish that are now feeding?
Man, I haven't got to cover any of that event. I've been out here practicing. I didn't get to watch any of it. I didn't even know they were catching schooling bass. And I guess to me that, that's actually a little bit surprising. I've spent a lot of time at Rayburn, but then again, there's so many bass in that place. There's fish that have definitely already spawned. There's fish that are spawning right now, I'm sure. And there's fish that are still pre-spawn. So whenever you have such a good fishery like Sam Rayburn, you're going to have fish to the spawn. You're going to have some that are just way out from spawning that aren't going to spawn until mid-April, and they're still out there pre-spawn. And I guess to get around the bait, and they'll come up schooling and stuff. Some of the fish they were catching may have been pre-spawn though. There's no doubt about it, because there was a couple weeks there where the weather got pretty warm, and talking to some friends back home, a lot of fish made a push up shallow. The fishing was really, really good, and I'm kind of bummed out because I have kind of kept up with it to a certain extent, knowing that just enough to know that it was pretty tough on those guys. And that's kind of unfortunate because, the lake was fishing so good a couple weeks ago. I mean, if you didn't have 20 pounds, there was no sense of going to the scales in a local tournament around there, from what I've been told, from friends back home. And it got really tough. There was a huge high school tournament. I think a little cold front pushed through, and I just hate that the lake didn't really show out for the Bass Pro Tour guys. But nonetheless, congratulations to Ott Defoe. I saw that he won. It popped up on my phone a while ago, so that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. Been watching it all day there. Now, but in terms of the video that you posted last April, there were quite a few fish there that you were catching on topwater that were schooling. Do you think those were all post-spawn fish? It just seems like
those were definitely post-spawn, and at that point you kind of had like a shad spawn going on. Those shad were spawning around the hydro on those flats and stuff, and those fish were just feeding up after the spawn. And I was throwing around a fluke and throwing around topwater. Really, you could throw anything, an A-rig, jerkbait. That is a really fun time to go to Sam Rayburn and catch a ton of fish, and you can still really catch some big ones too. And you can catch them at that time. You can catch them up shallow, throwing a frog around bushes and stuff. That's always, just a blast. Because the bluegill are starting to make their way up, to spawn and stuff. So the frog bite gets pretty good. There's an offshore bite, shallow grass. There's some fish in brush piles. So that's just a really good time to be at Sam Rayburn and to catch a lot of fish, man. It's just a lot of fun there. I've got to attribute a lot of what I've learned over the years from Sam Rayburn. It's such a diverse place that you can really learn how to do anything there, and you can get experience fishing in really any aspect from Sam Rayburn.
Let's talk a little bit about your equipment, because I know that we are going to hit that schooling season. Different parts of the country. In Southern California, that's more of a June, July thing for us, but I know throughout the country it's going to happen at some point. So let's talk about the equipment that you use. First of all, you have a favorite lure to throw on schooling fish like that?
Well, so actually at Smith Lake, that's how I got dialed in on the pattern there that allowed me to have a pretty decent event. I pulled up to a point that I'd already fished through there, and I seen there was a bunch of fish sitting out suspended off that point with my forward facing sonar. But when I pulled back up to it to fish it again, that they actually started blowing up and schooling right there. And I made a cast with a jerk bait. I was actually throwing a mega bass, 110. And I doubled up on two like 3 pounds spotted bass, and those were my first two keepers of the day at 11:30. I gotta give a huge shout out because I had a 3 pound spotted bass on each treble hook of this jerk bait, or on two of the three treble hooks. So those owner treble hooks saved my butt there. They come in clutch and kept those fish hooked up, and I was able to get them in the boat. But that's something I really like to throw on schooling fish is jerk bait. Obviously a top water spook and stuff like that. But sometimes, once they go down, you can still get those fish to bite with a jerk bait or a fluke or something like that. When the wind was blowing at Smith Lake, I could get those fish to bite a jerk bait. But whenever the wind wasn't blowing, I kind of had to throw a fluke and to get those fish to bite.
Okay, now in terms of let's talk about line. I hear quite a few people that will throw on those schooling fish because they're making long casts. Are you throwing braid, or are you throwing fluoro or mono? What kind of line are you using?
It depends on the top water that I'm using. If I'm throwing top water, whether or not I'll throw braid or whether or not I'll throw mono. I really like throwing those like a big pencil popper style, like an evergreen. And I feel like you get a lot better action out of those baits with braid. But anytime that I'm throwing braid with a top water bait with treble hooks, that's just kind of a nightmare for me, because you don't have any stretch, you don't have any give. So it's really important to have a really good rod at that point to make sure that you have enough give to keep that fish hooked up with that braid. So I kind of bounce back and forth between mono and braid. But yes, there's no doubt that you can make longer casts with braid. And that's something that I do at times. I remember fishing a Costa Championship on Kentucky Lake, and the fish would come up schooling about once an hour on the shell bar in like 6 inches of water, and you couldn't even get your boat up there to them, so you had to I was throwing a 7.6 hammer rod, medium action with the top water, but I had braid on there so I could air that thing out as far as I possibly could. And that was the only way I could get those fish to bite. So sometimes, braid is definitely necessary. But if I can get away with mono, I'll kind of throw mono because I just got more stretch, and I feel like I got a better chance of landing those fish. One key thing, though, that I will say at Smith Lake, something that I feel like made a big difference for me is when I was throwing around that fluke when it got really slick, I was throwing it on an 8-pound test Seagar, the gold label. It's a new line they just released, new line they have, and it's just basically it's specific for a leader line. It's a smaller diameter, but it's still super strong. And I was throwing 8-pound test tied to a 20-pound test leader of Smackdown, and man, it was kind of the deal for me. That line has super small diameter, but at the same time, it was still super strong. I didn't have to worry about breaking anything off. I even caught like a giant striper, and I was horsing it in with 8-pound test, and it didn't break. So that's a pretty big testament to how strong that stuff is. So since we're on the subject of that, man, I'd encourage everyone to check out that new gold label by Seagar. Some really good stuff.
Now, the purpose of using that 8-pound is so you can make a longer cast.
Well, I was throwing an 8-pound test because it was really clear,
Okay.
but I was throwing it to a braid leader, the Seagar Smackdown 20-pound test braided leader or braided main line, and then
Okay.
to the gold label leader, and I was throwing about, like a 10-foot leader or so, just so those spotted bass didn't see, that braid. I was just trying to be as sneaky as I could, because they were, without any wind, they were pretty picky on whether or not they would bite or not.
Okay, I understand it now. The way I was thinking, it sounded like it was the opposite way, but I get that. So you okay, and that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for clearing that up.
No, yeah, that was definitely key for me. Whenever that wind slicked off, you had to be as stealthy as you could with your presentation, because they were not wanting to bite. You had to really coax them into biting.
Now, going back to the braid thing, if you're throwing braid on for topwater or jerk baits, you mentioned you need a special rod for that. What kind of rod would you match if you're throwing braid?
So I like to throw, like, if I'm throwing a topwater on braid, I'll definitely throw like on a 7.3, probably medium action hammer rod, just to be able to make that super long cast. Now, if I'm throwing like a popper or something like that, something around, let's say I've got some post spawn fry garters, or maybe I've got some bluegill beds up shallow around cover, and I'm throwing like a popper or something like that, I'll use a shorter 7-foot medium action rod, medium action hammer rod, just to make a little bit more accurate cast around that shallow cover and stuff like that. But that the hammer rods are really, really parabolic, and with the line that we have nowadays that doesn't stretch much, like braid and like fluorocarbon, having a good parabolic rod that's got a lot of give to it throughout the rod, it really helps you keep them hooked up, and I think that goes a long ways. I think I see a lot of guys using way too stiff of rods now, and I think it attributes to a lot of breaking off, and it attributes to a lot of lost fish. Guys started throwing really, really stiff rods to compensate for the monofilament that everyone used back in the day. Monofilament had a lot of stretch, so they used a stiffer rod to compensate for that. But over the years, our line has developed and it's gotten better. Everybody throws fluorocarbon and braid now, so you don't have that stretch that you once had. So you've got to go down, on your heaviness of your rod to give it a little bit more forgiveness, so that you don't lose those fish.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are you looking for a bass rod that won't break your bank? Introducing the XT series from Top Tier Tackle. Proprietary carbon nano blank, grade A full cork handle and foregrip, top performing stainless steel, tangle-free guides, lightweight and durable, and a 1-year limited warranty. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Top Tier Tackle LLC. Visit their website at www.t3rods.com. We're talking to Dakota Ebare. He may be the toughest or the hardest working pro on tour. He's fished 6 major tournaments so far this season, and he's getting ready to fish another one. It just goes on and on and on. I wanted to talk to you, Dakota, this segment about hooks. I know that you have an affiliation with Owner, and I want, in your mind, what makes a good jig hook or punching hook? I know that the gap has a lot to do with it. Could you just give us some insight on what your thought process is on that?
Yeah, man. Owner has the jungle flipping hook, and for me, that's the best flipping hook that I've ever found, man. The thing about it is that it depends on the type of cover that I'm fishing, but you got to have a good bait keeper, and that's something that's really key, because you can't be getting hung up. If you're flipping in bushes and stuff like that, and your bait's sliding down constantly, you're gonna get hung up, and it's gonna kill your efficiency, and that can't happen. At the same time, so I've got to have a good bait keeper. That's very important for me. The other thing is, especially depending on how thick of cover I'm actually fishing, is having a strong enough hook. And that Owner Zowire hook is super strong, and it's not going to bend out on you. But at the same time, it's got a low diameter. So whenever I hit that fish, when I set the hook and he's in that bush, I'm not going to tear a really, really big hole in his mouth. That's something that's really important. I don't want a big, big thick hook that's going to tear a big hole whenever I set the hook. I want something that's got a low diameter, that's super strong, and it's not going to give whenever I'm trying to, let that fish come out of that bush and I'm keeping pressure on him or something like that. Or even hydrilla, same way. I don't want to really tear that fish's mouth open with a big, thick wire hook, So that's something that I really like about the Owner Zowire jungle flipping hook.
Are you a fan of a wider gap or a narrower gap?
Depends on the size of my bait. If I'm actually, I don't want to throw any bigger of a hook than what I've got to, especially if I'm fishing around heavy cover like wood, because that's just more of a chance for it to get hung up. So we'll actually downsize a lot of times our hooks when we're flipping bushes and stuff like that at Sam Rayburn, because even when I do get that fish hooked up, I don't need, I don't want all that extra gap in that hook hanging out of that fish's mouth to hang on stuff as I'm trying to get him out of the heavy cover. So that's something you got to keep in mind. That's kind of a little trick that some old school guys around Rayburn have taught me over the years, is to, just downsize your hook when you're actually fishing around, like, super heavy cover like flooded bushes and stuff like that, which is kind of backwards, I think, is what most people's idea behind that is. But if you're fishing around grass, it's not quite as important, because you don't have to worry about getting hung on limbs and stuff like that. But it really goes back to the size of the bait that I'm flipping. If you're flipping a big, thick bait, you're going to need a wider gap hook to compensate for that bait taking up that gap whenever you set the hook. You don't want too big of a bait on too small of a hook. So it really just goes back and forth. But most of the time, I'm using a 3/0 or I'm using a 4/0, honestly. And then if I'm flipping like a really big, bait like a Magnum Rage Bug or something like that, I'll go up to a 5/0.
Okay. Now I wanted to talk about trebles because, throwing crankbaits and jerkbaits and topwaters are fun, but the problem with that is that those are all treble hook baits. And you may hook some fish, but you're going to lose a lot. I was wondering if you might have, if you might have some tips as to how to keep fish buttoned up on treble hooks so they don't get off as easily.
Yep, and that's it. It's a one-stop shop with Owner, and I don't mean to beat that horse down, but I mean they're just good. It's just good stuff, man. They have the Zowire, which is that their patented technology, and it's a super, like, it's almost like a light wire hook because it's got a thin diameter, but it's still super strong. And so I think that's really good because you're going to have better penetration, especially when you're dealing with treble hooks. I keep in my boat at all times a replacement set of 8s, 6s, 5s, 4s, 2s, and even 1s. Those are the different sizes that I keep on me at all times. Yeah, if I'm throwing like a big spoon, I've got some replacement ones for those as well. But those are the sizes that I use mostly, and that covers you anywhere from a 10XD all the way to a small wiggle wart or something like that I might be throwing here. Sorry, people keep calling me. But so the biggest thing is just to pay attention to your hooks. I always change out my factory hooks. Whatever bait it is, I don't care what kind of bait it is, I'm changing out the hooks as soon as I get it. And I'm changing out the baits, changing out the hooks as soon as I get it. And but the STX and the ST series Owner Zowires from Owner is really just the way to go on that. I throw them on my jerk baits, crankbaits, top waters, all of that. And just having a good high quality treble hook that's not going to bend and it's going to stay sharp on you. And just to check your hooks. I mean, anytime you're throwing a bait around a lot of rocks and stuff like that, just check your hooks. Make sure those tips aren't bent off. Make sure your barb's still good. If you're catching a lot of bass, you just need to change those hooks out regularly, and that's the best advice I can give you. And then have a good rod. I think that's as important as anything. Not having too stiff of a rod, having the right hook, and using the right line for the application. You'll put the odds in your favor.
Well, the reality is that when a bait manufacturer packages a bait, one way they save on their costs and keep the price down is by putting less than superior hooks on the bait, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there are some baits that you pay a premium price for that come with a premium hook, and that's the way it is. But for the most part, like I said, I'm changing my hooks as soon as I get them, especially if I'm in a tournament. Now I might practice with the hooks that come on my bait or something like that. But when it comes down to tournament day, I'm putting those Owner Zowires on there. Another key, look, I keep these right here in my boat. This right here is a very, very good investment. This is a pair of Owner split ring pliers, and I can't tell you how much time this has saved for me. I've had these pliers for 2 years now, and it just allows me to change those treble hooks so fast. I keep them right there beside my step, and anytime I've got a bad hook, if I'm grinding it through rocks and I see I've got a tip that's a little bit dull, I'm pulling out these pliers and I'm swapping that treble hook. I don't care if it takes me, a minute or two from fishing. I need to know that I've got the best hooks on there whenever I get that bite that I need, and I want the odds in my favor whenever I've got that fish coming to the boat so I can get him in the boat.
Well, Dakota, that's a lot of good information about hooks. I appreciate you sharing that with us. I think it's worth hearing that from the guys that are out there using this equipment all the time. Let's talk about your next stretch of events. Nobody fishes as many tournaments as you do. What do the months of April and May look like for you?
Well, I'm kind of bummed out a little bit, honestly, because I've got this tournament here at Del Hollow. It starts next Wednesday. It's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I'm actually going to head home to spend Easter with my family in Louisiana. But I don't have anything after that until Lake Murray, and I think the tournament starts like April 22nd or something around there. So I've got 2 full weeks off, and kind of bummed out about it, man. Like,
wow, that's unusual.
I had this weekend off, and I've been here at Del Hollow for a couple days now, and I've been trying to refrain from practicing too much too early because this lake is changing by the hour. The water's warming up, it's rising, and then we got a cold front coming next week. You got a lot of things going on, so I'm trying not to get too dialed in on anything until the tournament gets closer. I don't want to get something in my head now and then it change before the tournament gets here. But where I'm going with all that is that, man, I get kind of lost when I don't have a tournament to go to, for the weekend. But it just, man, it's just fun to me fishing these tournaments, man. I'm just having fun, enjoying life, and trying to make the most of the opportunities that I have. Super thankful for every one of them, and I don't take a single day for granted on this water. I don't take a single day for granted out here on the water, man. It's truly been a blessing, and like I said, my goal is just to enjoy it and to make the most of the opportunities that I have while I have them. I can't say that and stress that enough. But yeah, so actually, I've got a couple weeks off. Then we have the next pro circuit event on Lake Murray, and then after that, I've got another week off, and then we go to Seminole, and from Lake Seminole, I go to the tour event on Eufaula, and that's the second week of May. And then the third week of May, I've got a Toyota Series event on Chickamauga. So that's pretty much got me covered for the next couple months. So I'm pretty excited about it. I think that old Burge is going to catch up to me a little bit, though, because he's got, he had the Bass Pro Tour event this week, which he did pretty well in. And then I think there's maybe 1 or 2 more. Well, I'm pretty sure he's going to go fish the event on Texoma. So, man, you can't take any credit away from that guy because he works his butt off too, and he fishes a bunch of them himself, and he's a great fisherman. So he's got several events, in the month of April where I only have one, so he might catch a little ground on me. So I got to do pretty good here at Del Hall and get as many points as I can.
That sounds good. Hey, Dakota, as always, thanks for being with us. Fun catching up with you, and good luck. We'll keep in touch. All right.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care. Wardrobe for the Bass Tour Anglers podcast is provided by Koppel Outfitters. Go have an adventure. Visit them online at www.koppeloutfitters.com and on social media at Koppel Outfitters.